Good afternoon. You're watching True Blue on Patriot TV. I'm Steve Friend, and this program is about doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way, and for the right reasons. I want to talk about the fact that the American people seem to be last on the list of priorities currently on from comes from the perspective of our ruling elite, from our public servants, people that are supposed to be leaders. And I want to sort of go along with this theme of priority Z. If you're the A priority, you get first dibs, but we seem to be Z. We're the last on the list. That's sort of a play on words because the first few stories I want to talk about pertain to who is priority A. It's a man that I like to call Z, the big Z, President Zelensky from Ukraine, who just is now like the leader of the free world, apparently. The guy just rolls around wearing the same olive green drab shirt. He can't find a suit to look respectable. Well, why does he have a reason to? We just keep throwing ogles and ogles of cash at his direction. And apparently he's using it to buy boats and Bugattis rather than upgrade his wardrobe. But there's a couple stories that caught my attention about the way that the narrative has been shaped throughout the last couple of years since Ukraine came to the forefront in its struggle against Russia. I'm not going to comment on the merits of the war that's going on there. I'm more interested in the way that we are being manipulated as a people in this country to throw our financial support to someone who doesn't share our values. And I have a problem with that. The first story, and this is a couple that built on each other, comes from The Blaze. According to The Blaze, Ukrainian outlet with ties to the US State Department puts The Blaze on a Russian disinformation watch list. Build this out, explain what this really means. You're going to have to stick with me. This organization, uh, on its face, it's on the front of the store, the sign says texty.org. That's the name of this media outlet, texty.org. And they published this article that's called Roller Coaster From Trumpists to Communists, the Forces in the US Impeding Aid to Ukraine and How They Do It. And in this article, as the Blaze reports, they list more than 75 entities within the United States and 400 individuals that oppose the United States sending money to Ukraine, saying things like, it's not our fight. We are indebted. We have trillions and trillions in debt. It might not be in our best interest to do that. And they want to call them out and identify them. They blame Congress actually for delaying the aid that they did wind up sending, when they voted to do it and then waved Ukrainian flags on the floor of the House. They blame that delay is actually hurting them even more. And they blasted 10 members of Congress, all Republican, for calling for a strong audit of the money, saying, hey, look, we're going to send you this money. We just want to make sure it goes where it's supposed to, not to buying Bugattis for Vladimir Zelensky. But apparently that's support of Russia per Texty. Now, it's not really a complete story here. The title alludes to a State Department link to texty.org, which is why the follow-up story is just as important. I mean, we could throw up the actual article that comes from texty.org, but the follow-up that the Blaze Media released the next day, I think pulls the curtain back really on what went on here, more so. Texty.org, like I said, is the name on the front of the building. But what is the real organization called? It's called the Data Journalism Agency. Data Journalism Agency. They're a member of another organization called the Global Investigative Journalism Network. Don't worry about the names too much. Just want to see how the breadcrumbs fall. Well, while claiming to be an organization promoting free press, it is part of this network of called Global Investigative Journalism Network that takes a lot of money from George Soros. So now we have the big baddie involved, that billionaire who wants a global government. But this organization takes Soros funds and then promotes globalism and color revolutions around the world. Keep on with this story. Clear evidence that They're receiving money directly from the United States government. The initial headline said the State Department. What is the actual evidence? Well, they went back into the Internet Archives, the Blaze, and the researching the story. And once you know it, they found, according to the website, that the data journalism agency, texty.org, that produced this article, that had named 75 entities, 400 people who questioned sending money to Ukraine as being pro-Russian stooges. The data journalism agency is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. That's a CIA carve out. So the CIA is giving money to the National Endowment for Democracy, who in turn gives that money to the Data Journalism Agency, another name for Texie.org, to produce these articles that call out our own people for being opposed to giving money to Ukraine. Think that's funding your own demise. One arm of the government giving money to a foreign entity to then promote giving more money of ours to a foreign entity. It's kind of a circle, isn't it? Certainly not something that I want my tax dollars going towards. Summarize. This is pretty clean if I haven't done it already. A Ukrainian NGO, non government organization, compiled a list of media organizations and individuals, and without proof, accused them of spreading Russian disinformation. The United States government funded this to push the narrative. Who was on this list too? It wasn't just the Blaze, and they understandably took umbrage with being listed as a Russian disinformation stooge. Who else? Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Rand Paul, Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, The Daily Wire, and The Blaze. 400 others were all listed. But it goes beyond just this one or two stories that The Blaze dug into and exposed, and not too much attention or fanfare, mind you. The US government is helping Ukraine media spread propaganda and silence Americans' critics. This one comes from The Federalist, another source. US taxpayer dollars are flowing to outlets. And again, we're going to get kind of wrapped up in some names, but it's worth throwing them out there because the Federalist did a good job of researching. One organization is called the New Voice of Ukraine. Another is called Vox Ukraine, Detector Media, Institute of Mass Information, and the Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine. These are all media outlets that exist within that little hellhole over there that we seem to be throwing billions and billions of dollars into. Now, one of them that I said was Vox Ukraine. What is Vox Ukraine? Vox Ukraine released a highly produced video attacking the credibility of American opposition to its war with Russia, to funding its war with Russia. Detector Media produces social media posts branding American critics of the war as part of Russian disinformation. It's the same playbook over and over again. But they are Ukrainian media sources. They can say whatever they want, right? We don't care. It has nothing to do with us. I certainly don't sit down at night and say, you know what? What's Vox Ukraine saying? I'm going to turn their channel on. But I should care. Why? The media groups are funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development, better known as USAID. They're almost wholly funded by USAID. The United States government is giving money to Ukrainian media outlets to generate content that supports what Ukraine wants and to criticize us over here for saying, I don't really care what Ukraine wants. I'm more worried about, what's the price of the yellow tag beef that I have to now buy for my kids because we've inflated our currency to untold levels to finance your BS war over in Ukraine. I guess that makes me a Russian stooge, according to Vox Ukraine. But more information about them. Immediately after Russia invaded, US aid gave emergency grants to media in Ukraine. You could see it maybe if you take a step back. Hey, look, there's a active, hot, kinetic war going on right now. We're worried about a humanitarian crisis. Maybe the media could put out public service announcements and say, hey, look, you should evacuate the hostile area. You can go to this location. Or maybe you need food or water. You can go to Y location. You could see there being a place for media there. maybe the United States as part of its aid outreach. And full disclosure on me, I don't think foreign aid is something we can afford in general at all at this point. But why quibble with that at this point? We're just worried about the humanitarian the humanitarian crisis going on. We want to make sure that we help those people. But that's not what the USAID money went to when it went to media in Ukraine. According to the Federalist, it went to this organization called the Zinc Network. The grant description notes that the money went to Zinc and Director Media to assist the Ukrainian government with strategic communication to, quote, undermine Kremlin information operations. It's a propaganda campaign. So Russia comes over the border, and the first instinct of the United States government is to throw money to Ukraine media to issue propaganda in support of Ukraine in this engagement. Ukrainian outlets also produced highly edited English language propaganda. Well, in Ukraine, they don't speak English as their first language, not even as their second language. Why then is the United States funding media outlets in Ukraine to produce English speaking products? Because they know they're going to find their way back to the United States. They're going to find their way in front of you, in front of your eyes. And therefore, you don't want to be told you're a Russian stooge. You don't want to be helping Putin. You want to send the billions to Ukraine. Again, it's a circle. We send our money over there to produce products to encourage us to send more money over there and also back to our arms producers over here. It's just corrupt. It's a corrupt circle. We've got more examples because you are not the first priority of this government. They are over there. Stick with us through the break. More to come here. You're watching True Blue on Patriot TV.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold.
Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Welcome back to True Blue on Patriot TV. I'm Steve Friend. Just want to remind you all, while you're here on patriot.tv, go to patriot.tv/True Blue. That is our show's site here on Patriot TV. You can find out how to become a Patriot Defender member there. This is a up and coming media organization. The reason I came over here is because they allow me to bring you content that I do, unfettered, pure information, not stuff that's approved by legacy media, just the truth. And that's why Patriot TV was appealing to me to come over, and I encourage you to go to there to support our program here on True Blue and support the network as a whole. There's going to be lots more information coming out in the next few weeks about how you can support Patriot, how you can support True Blue, and encourage you all to do that. Today, we're talking about how the American people are not a priority. Instead, it seems to be Ukraine. We cut short this story that the Federalist brought about how the United States is funding Ukrainian media to essentially produce products that are intended for an American audience so that the American audience will get behind sending more money. So we send money over there so that we can encourage Americans to send even more money over there. And what are we sending our money to? I don't really know because there's so much propaganda. I just know I distrust it. And I distrust it even more because, as the Federalist reports here, so many of these organizations that are receiving money to produce media content have a bad history. Vox Ukraine, they're a fact finder, a fact checking partner for Meta, which, has no history of doing any sort of censorship. But Vox Ukraine helps them censor content that is critical of the Ukrainian side of things with its war with Russia. Before the war, also, President Zelensky has a bad history. Look, I don't want to quibble about foreign aid, but if we're going to send money to a foreign entity, I at least want them to share our values that we have here in this country. And we've been told over the last 2.5 years that Ukraine is democracy incarnate, right? This is the last best hope for democracy in Europe. Not so much. Before the war, President Zelensky made a motion in 2021. The war started in 2022. In 2021, though, President Vladimir Zelensky wanted to close television channels in his country that were critical of him. So much for being a free speech democracy enthusiast. This law was called the On Media Law, and it penalized what they called hate speech and disinformation. And it banned media outlets without even having a court order. Zelensky got behind it. And the US aid funded Ukrainian media network defended him. So at the time, even before Russia invaded, the United States was propping up Zelensky and this law, this on media law, that would allow the Ukrainian government to silence media critics of him. They said that this was not an attack on freedom of speech because the channels, the group argued, were giving informational support to Russian aggression. And also, Vladimir Zelensky, he suspended elections. So democracy, free speech, not really a high priority for the big Z, just producing media that generates sympathy in this country to send more money to his little hellhole country so that he can live like a billionaire and tell the rest of the world that he is really the modern day Winston Churchill. Meanwhile, he suspends elections to keep himself in power and keeps the circle of funds flowing to him and his allies and his media while simultaneously crushing any media that has an opposing viewpoint. And if you say anything different, well, you're just a Putin stooge, which I'm sure I'll be called. I haven't even expressed sympathy to one side or the other. I just don't want American money going towards it because I'm tired of Americans being the priority Z. We should always be priority A. The question is, how does it affect us here? And the only effect that I'm seeing is higher prices when I go to the grocery store to buy food for my kids. Away from Zelensky, though, let's go to another conflict that's been on the top of the list. Again, not America, but since last October, there's been this hostile conflict between Hamas and Israel. And as always, the calls for do something have led to arbitrary spending of money that we don't have in engagements that don't involve us. How many Americans actually know where Israel and Hamas find themselves on a map? But the snap reaction from our ruling elite is to just send money, which is what they're doing. This comes from Insider Paper. The U.S. promises $400 million to Palestine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, on a new trip across the region, said he is seeking a ceasefire here, but meanwhile wants to send $404 extra to Palestine for humanitarian aid. Apparently, the Secretary of State doesn't realize that money is fungible. And while you might send money intended for humanitarian aid, $404 million, whatever the Hamas bros don't take and pocket themselves while they're sitting in the UAE, while their own people starve, is going to be sent to buy rockets to send them back at Israel. The U.S. pledge has brought its total pledge to $674 million going to Palestine. We're a country that's $37 trillion in debt, and we're borrowing money to send it to a terrorist organization to engage in a hot conflict in the Middle East. Is that an American priority? No. We're borrowing money, essentially inflating our own currency to finance both sides of a conflict half a world away. Now, to something that is not money related, but justice related. And this is something that's more in line with my subject matter expertise. And this comes from Uncover DC in a story about John Kerry. Now, the FBI was investigating suspected Iranian terrorists. And when John Kerry was in the Obama administration, he impeded that. If the interests of our country are to ensure justice, if the FBI is supposed to be an objective force for good, on the rare times that they actually do find a terrorist, shouldn't that be a good thing? Well, at the time, John Kerry was the Secretary of State, the Obama administration, Freudian slip, was engaged in negotiations with Iran, the nuclear investigations, right? And Obama wanted to have a crown jewel achievement. Didn't really matter what was in it, but just to say, I got a deal. But John Kerry, according to Uncover DC, actively interfered with the FBI executing arrest warrants on individuals in the United States illegally supporting the Iranian government. The Iranian government needed, and according to Uncover DC, they were receiving support in the form of weapons of mass destructions, financial support, and ballistic missile programs. Sounds pretty bad. But unclassified FBI emails now from 2017 show that at least 8 instances of Iran deal-related issues where the FBI, DOJ, and United States government could have acted on the information and gone and arrested the terrorist, and they didn't. One email response from this guy whose name is Louis Bladel states, "We are all beside ourselves on ask the field to stand down on a layup arrest. However, as it stands right now, we all have to sit back and wait until the United States and Iran negotiation ends." So they had actionable intelligence. They had their subjects identified. They knew they were providing material support to Iran to create weapons of mass destruction, which would be used for terrorist activities. And yet they were given the stand down order by the Secretary of State. How is that in the interest of the American people? That's a cabinet level secretary who is telling federal law enforcement not to enforce the law. And this isn't even a defense of the FBI. Where were they saying, no, we swore an oath to uphold and protect the Constitution. We are duty bound to protect the people in this country. They're our priority. We're going to execute this ground ball arrest and get a vile, vicious, dirty terrorist off the streets. No, we're just going to sit back and wait for the regime to tell us what to do, because the American people aren't our priority. Our own existence is. And Bladel was rewarded. He was promoted. He became the special agent in charge of counterintelligence in New York. So he got his 30 pieces of silver. And that's really, I think, where I want to stop on this sharing of stories. I've got some others. They're kind of unrelated to these, but I think it's worth having some closing thoughts here. It's very clear, if it isn't to you already, for these stories, but the track record that we've seen in the last few years, that America first is this mythical concept to too many people in positions of authority. They are bending over backwards, doing backflips to send your money to countries that you can't find on a map, and you shouldn't have to. You should be worried about going to work, providing for your family. And as a result of these irresponsible actions that are not putting you as a priority, they've made going to work harder because gas is a lot more expensive. And they've made feeding your family even harder because have you checked the prices at the grocery store? I just rolled in to get a haircut 2 days ago. It cost me $35, and the woman didn't even have to whip out a pair of scissors. That is because I am not a priority. You are not a priority. Ukraine is a priority, but not really. The people that make these calls, they're prioritizing themselves. They're generating fake news stories to get you to support these initiatives, not because they care about Ukraine, which they don't. They just want to generate a narrative that gets the funds flowing back and forth. And, they carve out a piece for themselves. Military industrial complex hits its bottom line, and they donate back to the campaigns of our elected, quote unquote, leaders. And when they want to get a crowning jewel achievement, they'll stand in the way of justice, as the Secretary of State did to the FBI when they had real, legitimate terrorists in their crosshairs. We're not a priority here, folks. And until we demand change, we never will be. I'm going to demand change. I hope you do. And I hope you use the evidence that I'm providing you today and in the future on this program here to do it. Thank you very much for joining me today. You've been watching True Blue on Patriot TV. We'll see you next time.